Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jared Farrell. I'm a Senior Client Advisor at Global Reviews, and I would like to welcome you along this morning to this session that we are going to be doing about attribution in terms of marketing strategy. We have many people on the call this morning from many different departments, so I'm hoping that the content that we're going to go through will cover something which will be interesting to everybody. I will also be looking at lots of results from many different industries, both within the UK and in Ireland, so hopefully, again, there will be data as well, which will be interesting to everybody. If you have any questions, typically we leave questions right until the very, very end. If you can send them through as a message, and then at the very, very end of the session, I will take a look at the questions, come back online, and then answer any questions that there may be. So we have quite a bit to get through this morning, and I have 30 minutes to get through it all. So I am going to go through it quite quickly. So again, if you have any questions, please hold on to them until the very, very end. So as I said, we are going to be talking about attribution this morning, and this is part of a program that we run in Global Reviews, which is called the Digital Marketing Effectiveness Program. I'm going to talk about the methodology in a moment and what's made up of that, but essentially the concept that we're looking at here in attribution is looking in terms of the digital marketing strategy and how can we measure essentially what causes certain different types of behaviors or events. And I suppose when we talk about attribution in marketing, we're talking about sales, and what was it that drove sales in terms of advertising and different types of stimuli. So on screen in front of you, you can see some of the things that we're going to cover in this session this morning. So in a digital marketing strategy, what drives repertoire shortlisting? How do we attribute a value to this? And what are the limitations? And when I talk about limitations there, I'm talking specifically about the limitations within market research, because ultimately that is one of the greatest limitations in measuring attribution. The components that make up a dispositional attribution. Now, when we say dispositional attribution, we're talking about external attribution, so external stimuli, which may drive a particular type of behavior or event. So the opposite of dispositional attribution would be situational attribution. Well, I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. So within dispositional attribution, the things I'm going to be covering are the concept of search journey. We're going to be talking about the role of the industry in terms of driving attribution, so that is industry change, so maybe at a more macro level. And then obviously we can't move through this without talking about consumer and consumer behavior and ultimately how that is affected in terms of attribution. So what is the final impact this has on final preference, that one exclusive choice out of potentially a repertoire of shortlisting that we have at the top point? And then how do we measure lost opportunities, which I'm going to go into in more detail, but essentially this is the idea that I am in the repertoire, but I'm not making it to the final preference. Why? So, in a nutshell, they're all the different things that we're going to be talking about this morning. But before we go into anything, I'd like you to introduce who we are as a company. So many of you will know who we are. Some of you will have participated in webinars before in the past. And for those who don't know us, we are an international digital consumer analytics and competitor intelligence provider. We do that through two different programs that we run internationally, the Digital Marketing Effectiveness Program and the Digital Sales Effectiveness Program. This morning I am going to be talking exclusively about the Digital Marketing Effectiveness Program, and I'll explain where that fits within the funnel of the consumer journey as we move through this presentation. We deliver a scientific measurement framework, and what I mean by that is we benchmark best practice performance internationally in terms of strategy. And so that strategy really, in terms of measuring digital effectiveness, is both in the area of marketing and then also in the area of sales. I referred to this earlier, the Digital Marketing Effectiveness Program and the Digital Sales Effectiveness Program. We are the largest digital behavioral syndicated program providers in the world, and covering some of the territories you can see on screen in front of you. We're in the UK, we're in Ireland, Benelux, Spain, Italy, the USA, Australian markets, and also in the Austro-Asian markets. So we were founded in 2000, which makes us 15 years old, and we have been doing this with many of the largest brands around the world. I didn't want to put all of the brands up on screen in front of us, but in 21 different industries across the world. We work in finance, in energy, in sports betting, in insurance, in many, many different industries. And we take the learnings from one industry with one client and we help and apply it to another client in another industry. So there is benchmarking within the specific industry that we may be looking at, but we're also taking learnings from other industries that are doing things particularly well and feeding that back into our clients in, let's say, for example, the insurance industry when it comes to something like facilitating decisions or channel selection. So in a nutshell, that's who we are in Global Reviews. And what we're going to be talking about this morning is really measuring customer experience and marketing strategy within that. On screen in front of you, you can see the proprietary funnel that we have developed in Global Reviews for measuring the customer experience. And this morning, I'm really only going to be talking about the first three, or actually the first two. I mentioned that we have two programs, the Marketing Effectiveness Program, and we also have the Sales Effectiveness Program. So the Marketing Effectiveness Program really covers the discover and the consider phase. And ultimately what we're trying to measure here is how easily can customers find you and how strong is your attraction. If you imagine from the moment that they start their online journey all the way until they reach the website and including the homepage of the website, how attractive are you in drawing customers to your website? And then the consider through to the act phase is really about how easy is it for customers to purchase from you online? And of course, there is a period or a phase which interlocks these two things together, which is how effectively do you engage customers and help them match your product or service to your needs. And so the discover and the consider phase are part of the Digital Marketing Effectiveness Program, but the consider and the act phase are also part of the Digital Sales Effectiveness Program. And while the two different programs, I'll be only talking about one of them this morning, they are very much interlocked. Okay, so that is the science behind the consumer journey element. The Digital Marketing Effectiveness Program, to talk about the methodology a little bit, because that is what we're going to be focusing on this morning. In essence, it is a quantitative study. And what we do is we invite 200 in-market consumers each month to complete an online interview into a specific industry that we are doing research in. So for example, if it was something like home insurance, each month we would recruit or invite people from partner providers, panel providers that we have partnerships around the world. The largest panel providers, you'll know them well, Research Now, Survey Sampling International, Synth. We work with many of the different international panel providers and we recruit people into our studies. We recruit them on the basis that they're in market, which means that they're looking to buy or switch or enter that market within the next 90 days. So as we roll up 200 a month, we reach an annual sample size of 2,400. Now, what's special about the concept of in-market is that in any omnibus sample, if we asked an omnibus sample of 1,000 people how many of them were planning on buying a new car, we may find that the proportion is somewhere in around 10% or 15%. So within a sample size of 1,000, that would be a very niche group. So this 200 in-market consumers is that niche group, and we're delivering that on a large sample basis and on a longitudinal basis. So that's the first element with regards to how the sample is made up and how frequently we're talking to them. The first thing we do then when we invite them into the study is we ask them a number of pre-task questions. We ask them, can they recall any particular providers in the industry that we're doing research in? So for example, if it was home insurance, who can you recall unprompted? That's obviously not the wording of the particular question, in the home insurance market, let's say, for example, in the UK. From that, we will then ask them, of those that you can recall, who would be your initial preference at this stage in terms of, buying from a particular provider in the market. We then take them to what we call the blank screen test or the blank screen study. And it is a blank screen where there is an empty URL box and the participant types in where they would like to go to on the internet. We set them a task of to look on the internet within the particular industry for a product in that industry. So for example, if they're looking for motor insurance, please go look for a motor insurance provider, and we set them an allocated amount of time to do that. When they come back into the study, we then ask them to tell us what brands they would consider on a shortlist at this stage. So essentially what we're talking about is a repertoire of brands. We ask them why they would shortlist these brands, and then we ask them, from your shortlist of brands, who would you consider as your one exclusive preferred brand at this stage? So Two key elements in terms of the actual research methodology. The first one is that the areas that are highlighted in green on the screen in front of you are claimed behavior. It is the more typical type of research that we would find out there, and it is essentially the legacy research that we've been doing worldwide for many, many years. There are limitations in terms of claimed behavior because people are poor at predicting their behavior or even at recalling their own behavior, and a term which is known as the limitations of asking. A way around this gap in terms of people being poor predictors of their own behavior is that we also conduct passive research, which ethnography would fall into that field. And essentially that is where we passively observe or try to record a person's behavior without becoming involved so that we can gather in a natural environment what they would do. And that is what the blank screen study does. Because as a person completes the study, we are measuring and recording everything that they're doing. So every click that they click on, every website that they visit, every ad that they click on, and the period of time that they may have spent on a particular page. Out of that, we can measure keywords that are used, we can measure the pathways that are taken, and then obviously by pulling it against different types of demographics, we're able to search and segment on the basis of who they are and where they ended up. So that's the overall methodology in terms of how we capture the data and the process that a participant will go through when they are completing the interview. So let's get straight into the data then. And I'm going to start off with the mortgage market in Ireland. Now, I'm going to be jumping around to lots of different industries to show lots of different types of results and examples from lots of different data sets. And so we're starting off with this area of the mortgage market in Ireland. And what I would like to start off with is on the very left-hand side, you can see recall, visited, shortlisted, and preferred. I'd like to explain these four concepts very quickly. And then once we have those, we can then move on. Recall is unprompted brand awareness. Visited is the proportion of people in the blank screen study who visited the brand's website. Shortlisted is the number of people who shortlisted this brand within their repertoire. And then finally, preferred is the final exclusive one brand out of the shortlist that you have created. A key component of the methodology is the idea that before the blank screen study, people are making decisions generally based on perceptions or brand relationship, that maybe they're a current provider, a current customer of a particular provider, or have had a previous relationship. The blank screen study offers an opportunity for education and advertising in a real world environment to get involved, and then we bring them back in. So the shortlisted really is like an A/B test. Now the person has been educated and gone through the real world environment in terms of finding out the different options and offers that are available to them. And then the shortlisted to preferred, we're really trying to understand what is it that's driving from one provider at the final exclusive stage, which is the preferred, to they had multiple providers beforehand, and how are they making that decision to rule some brands out and to rule some brands in. So a key question that we would ask in terms of what this sales acquisition funnel is trying to show us is, how do we measure marketing effectiveness? And that is a key question in terms of attribution. Do we measure it on recall, so unprompted or prompted brand awareness? Do we measure it on return on advertising investment or return on investment at the repertoire stage? Or do we look at directly on sales? Well, of course, we look directly on sales. That's the bottom line, and that is the most commercial metric that we have. But ultimately, when we're looking at attribution, the key question I'm raising is there are lots of different areas at which we can say we're measuring against. And ultimately, that is the first decision that we need to make when we're trying to decide on an attribution model. What is it that we're measuring against? So I'm going to put forward how we do it in Global Reviews with the Digital Marketing Effectiveness Program. So the first element is within the recall, we pick up initial preference. I talked about that already. Within the visited, we're understanding journey taken, and we're taking them through this real world environment. But when they come to the shortlisted stage, this really is the efforts of marketing, because when they come to recall, essentially that is Halo. That is the brand Halo. That is all the different things that they have in there and whether you're top of mind. People can get into the shortlist, though, who haven't been recalled at the beginning. And that may be because they're on an aggregator website, and the consumer goes through an aggregator website to find a solution and picks up your brand, and then you become part of the shortlist. Essentially, it's a touch point on the journey. So this shortlisted area is you've now gotten onto the list of the providers that they would consider. And there may be multiple different reasons that they may do that. But ultimately, this shortlisted element is the efforts of our marketing spend that has gotten us to this point. Because if you're not on a shortlist, you're not going to get to the final preferred. You have to get onto the shortlist first. So if we take this premise that the shortlist is the efforts of our marketing, that gives us a great starting place in terms of measuring attribution. And then finally, from shortlist to preferred, we have this lost opportunity concept, which is you didn't make it to the final exclusive preferred brand, but you did get into the shortlist. Why didn't you make it? What was that lost opportunity? And to give you an example, within this mortgage market in Ireland, looking at some conversion ratios, the scores at the bottom of the screen are the shortlist to preferred scores for each of these different brands. So we can see that AIB's at minus 87.3, KBC's at minus 73.3, and permanent TSB's at minus 100. Now, you can run these numbers a number of different ways. You could look at the recall to preferred, and that would see that AIB, from an unprompted brand recall at 91% dropping to 20% of the preferred, their conversion or negative conversion ratio would be much higher than permanent TSBs, for example. So we're going to come back to the mortgage market in Ireland again, but now what I'd like to do is I'd like to move into a different area altogether. What we're going to do is we're going to look at insurance. We're looking at motor, home, and travel insurance, but we're really focusing on this concept of shortlisted. Three elements that make up shortlisted generally are the area of some level of a brand relationship. We also have the area of the product maybe having some kind of effect and impact in terms of the messaging or what the product offers over and above what other products being offered by competitors. We have advertising and we have journey. So I wanted to show between different types of insurance products in the UK, and this is at the shortlisted stage, we ask consumers, why did you shortlist the different providers that you did shortlist? And so what we're looking at here is that some things are more important in some markets than they are in other markets. So for example, in motor insurance, I'm familiar with their name is really much more important than it is, for example, say, for travel insurance and home insurance. I trust these companies is different for motor and home than it is for travel. I saw them when I use a search engine. Again, much more important for travel insurance than it is for the others, and I have seen advertising from them recently. Now, I pulled out this advertising from them recently piece particularly because I wanted to focus on this concept of what are the limitations that we currently have within market research worldwide, because that is a massive part of how we are measuring attribution and what we can and cannot do. So, I have seen advertising from them recently as an option that we have within the shortlisted question within the Digital Marketing Effectiveness Program. Within that, all of the people who answered that question, we then asked them, where do you recall seeing or hearing advertising or promotion from this brand? And so you can see the different scores that are on the screen in front of us. But if you know this gentleman, John A. Wanamaker, he famously is attributed with saying 50% of my advertising is wasted, but the problem is that I don't know which 50%. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And so what is the challenge? The challenge is that it's a research challenge. How do we measure how many TV ads a person saw in a day, or radio spots or billboard ads, when essentially we can't see exactly what they actually saw? So there are some solutions out there in the market in terms of market research of how we are measuring the number of TV ads a person actually saw, which isn't based on claimed behavior. We have things like the people meter. We have things like the portable people meter, which is another one for radio, which is based on submarine technology. But all of these different types of solutions are ultimately fragmented into different types of media channels, and they don't really come together to give us a holistic answer. The other side of this problem is that we believe that a person sees around 400 advertising messages a day, but actually only recalls 10. So the challenge there is that there is massive amount of clutter in the media landscape and in advertising. So those 10 that they recall are achieving cut through probably because of the quality of the creative. But the idea is if the performance of advertising is based on penetration, media placement, and cut through, which is based on the quality of advertising, if we don't know whether a person saw an ad or not, how will we ever be able to measure whether potential recall is due to the quality of the advertising creative? And so we have our current market research solution for offline media, which is claimed recall, which is essentially what you have on screen in front of you. In online, however, we can measure pathways and click streams, but we still have challenges around advertising exposure. Did they view the ad is valuable, even if we don't know whether they clicked it. If we know they didn't click it, they may still have seen it, and advertising exposure still has a value in that case. So the solution that we present and that we have developed with the Digital Marketing Effectiveness Program is a mixed methodology based on this concept of claimed behavior and passive behavior. So it's passive online measurement of consumers' online behavior and journeys, and then looking at claimed behavior in terms of other elements of what actually is driving the shortlist. So let me give you some further detail around this concept of an attribution model then. So what we need to do is we need to identify various different things before we even start the concept of trying to figure out the attribution. So one of those is the previous relationship element is really, really important. Are they a current customer? Are we looking at retention, or are we looking at recruitment? Are they a lapsed customer? What is that relationship that is there? In terms of the online journey, we need to capture really what's the importance in different industries in terms of going to a research site, the level of involvement of the product, and also, the role of aggregators, the number of competitors that are in the industry. So being able to capture passive behavior in terms of online is massively important, and it's merging this with other methodologies within the overall program that really delivers this ability to be able to develop some kind of measurement for attribution. So just showing that this concept of situational attribution versus dispositional attribution, which was this internal versus external that we raised earlier on. So I'm going to give you an example of how we would do this then. So on screen in front of you, you can see an example from an insurance industry in Ireland. And what we have here is two different points where we looked at a sample set that was run in 1 month, and then a sample set was run a number of months later. And I'm looking at the percentage difference in shortlisting scores between one study, let's say, for example, in February, and the other study, let's say, for example, in June. And I'm trying to see what is it that's driving shortlisting. And so what we can see is I have seen a promotion or advertising from them is up in the percentage difference scores. I saw them when I used a search engine. Their website helped me find products and services quickly, and their website was visually appealing. So we can capture the various different elements that they claim are driving shortlisting, but then by actually using other elements in order to determine where that growth is coming from and investigating whether these scores are matching actual journey patterns during the period when the research was conducted, we can start to build a very comprehensive picture of what is driving attribution. So these three elements then that I'm going to propose to you with regards to how we look at drivers of change and growth in terms of attribution. The first one is the role of the search journey. The second one is understanding industry context and changes within the industry and how that can drive attribution. And then finally, we're going to look at consumer behavior, as I mentioned earlier on, being a key component. So the very first element that we're going to look at, search journeys, and I'm going to give you a couple of examples of how we can go about doing this. Health insurance in Ireland in 2015. On the left, we have the three key touch points in terms of health insurance for customers when they're moving through looking for a different provider. Search engine coming in at 91%, a brand website coming in at 76%, and then a research website coming in at 31%. In Ireland, that is mostly the Health Insurance Authority. There are only really 4 to 5 players in the Irish health insurance market, so it is quite a small market. But we can then, this is all passive behavior. From what we've captured as we went through the study, we can look at the actual multiple search pathways and find out how different people were moving. We can look at them on a segmented basis, whether it be gender or age, family status, or where they are in the market in terms of whether they're lapsed, new to the market, and switching. So this is really interesting, but we want to take this data one step further. We want to really understand how they're using the search engines within the actual multiple pathways that they're taking. So now I'm switching over to travel insurance and motor insurance, and I want to show you the difference between these two different industries in the UK when it comes to the search terms that are used and ultimately the websites that they end up on. Interesting here, we've got travel insurance and annual travel insurance, the top key search terms used within travel insurance sector, and they would be general terms. The next term after that then is what we would call a comparison term. Whereas over on the motor insurance side, we can see that brand terms are coming up as much more important. When we look at the corresponding actual websites which were visited, we can see how these different types of terms are driving to different types of websites. So we can see that for those general terms, people are being driven to moneysupermarket.com, which is an aggregator, or moneysupermarket.com is optimized very well in terms of picking up the general terms. Well, there on the right-hand side, we can see that the terms from the motor insurance, moneysupermarket.com is also coming up very, very high. And so what that's telling us is that the comparator, that the aggregator website is picking up both on the general side because it's driving from travel insurance in terms of the general search terms, but on the right-hand side, it's also picking up on the basis of brand term. Compare the market coming in second place there, and Money Supermarket obviously competing on other people's terms and then also picking up on the general terms. So a key element that I'm trying to raise here, though, is this concept of different markets has different types of consumer behavior, and understanding the search terms as they're moving through it gives us a key indication of how we can attribute different things to ultimately what's driving our scores. So moving on now, I'm still within the travel insurance market, and this time I'm going to fly through this very quickly. What we have is we have grouped together the different terms based on the number of searches a person has done, because we have people doing multiple searches. So I have looked at the top 3 times or top 3 searches that a person does when they're on a search engine and looking for travel insurance. So the first search, we can see 56% is a brand term, then that goes down a little bit to 44%, and then on the third term it's down to 39%. And comparison is rising in terms of the actual the importance of the comparison term when people are searching. We can see the proportion to which they're actually searching. So 90% are doing one search. Then of that 90%, 45% are going on to do the second search, and then 43% of the 45% are doing a third search. Within motor insurance, it's a very different picture altogether. We can see that brand, like what we saw on the previous slide, is much, much more important and continues to be important. Interestingly, in motor insurance, we have 62% completed the first search. Now, I've removed all the scores of those who put in a search engine as their first search, it was in motor insurance, it was quite surprising to see so many people put in terms like Google or Bing or Yahoo, but we did not score them as an actual brand term search. So then on the second search, it's really when they're getting going, and that's why we see 95% on the second search. So just some key information on the screen with you just with regards to brand is really just a brand term. Comparison, what we refer to there, is basically where the word comparison or compare has been used, and then proportional search, I've explained, is the proportion of the previous search. So looking then specifically at the actual what they're doing when they were going through the search, I've pulled out the results of those who searched by the term Health Insurance Ireland. And we can see that those who searched on this basis, this is the page that they would have seen. And we can look and see, because we're recording everything, what they actually click on. So we can see what proportion are clicking on the ads, what proportion are clicking on the organic search. And so what's interesting and what we can learn from this is that advertising top of mind can do 2 things. The first thing it can do is it can drive people to put a search term into a search engine. And the second thing is that it can drive awareness, so that when someone sees a term, they may not have put it into the search engine, but when they see the term, it prompts them to actually click on it. So there are 2 ways in which advertising can drive it at the search engine stage. And so we can see ultimately how that drives things. So that is the first stage, which is the search. The second one I want to talk about is industry. And this time I'm going to be looking at the energy market in the UK, and I'm looking at 3 different studies over 3 different months, February, March, and April of this year. And I want to look at things that are happening within the marketplace and how we can attribute change to things happening within the marketplace. So within this market, Energy UK, the percentage of people who claim to be able to recall a brand over the 3 months dropped from 84% down to 77%. That is interesting. And the proportion who had no initial preference who typically then say, well, I have no initial preference because I choose the provider who's got the best price, is increasing from 53 to 56. Small increase, but we're looking at a trend. So what we're seeing is some level of disconnect in the market in terms of how people are moving, and it is a utility product, but are we looking at more of a commoditization of this product? How is this affecting the brands? The unprompted brand recall score during that period, all of the brands are down generally, because we saw that on the previous slide, but the big brands like British Gas are really being hit, dropping from 70% to 59% from February through to April. I was interested in the score of British Gas against First Utility. There are many different providers in the marketplace, but I really wanted to just focus on these two. So we've got British Gas coming in with a combined score across the 3 months of 64% for brand recall, 16% visiting the site, 30% shortlisted, and 13% preferred. I wanted to split the sample set in half. The top two brands top in terms of unprompted brand recall scores, and then the bottom brands that I've included here, OVO and First Utility, lower on brand recall, but doing very well in terms of conversion at shortlist stage. We can see the positive versus the negative scores here when we look at the recall to shortlist conversion. And then if we look at the preference conversion from recall, we can see the First Utility are doing very, very well, whereas British Gas are dropping off. And so what is this telling us? And especially when you introduce this piece of information, which is 32% of those who are currently customers of British Gas would choose them at the final preference stage. So they're losing, the churn rate is high. So what is it that we can learn within the industry that we now know that there's this increasing potential commoditization and what's going on that can help us in terms of understanding how we might be able to do something about this, and certainly the attribution element with regards to the industry context. So what I did was I built a segment of those who shortlisted British Gas, and I built a segment of those who shortlisted First Utility, and I wanted to see how they were different. First thing I found was those who were shortlisting First Utility were more likely to go to an aggregator than those who were shortlisting British Gas. No major surprises there, I don't think. And then on the multiple pathways, those who were shortlisting First Utility were much more likely to go from search to aggregator than those who were using British Gas. Again, no major surprises there, I don't think. But what we found was that First Utility are intercepting customers at the aggregator stage, while British Gas is more likely to be based on website. Okay, that's what we would expect. But when we look at the actual visits by domain of the two different groupings, we can see that USwitch is very important for both groups, which is really interesting. So USwitch, the second most visited domain in terms of those who are moving through the search engine for British Gas, and first for First Utility. And what happens if we go through this process of actually seeing what happens when we go onto the USwitch site and where British Gas may be losing off? So the key message is when British Gas shortlisters visit USwitch, do British Gas lose them as a potential customer? Are they donating customers to use First Utility? So I thought it was interesting to see straight away that there was an endorsement element within USwitch for Eon. But then when I actually went through the search and I was looking for a different type of provider, I could see that First Utility was in the top 3 search results, was coming out in the top 2, and British Gas were placed in 40th place below the personal projection in terms of what I wanted from my provider or what product I was looking for. Now, okay, so we don't want to compete on price. We don't want to get into that kind of war. That's fine. But we have one key question in the Digital Marketing Effectiveness Program, which is, if a customer found a suitable product or offer on a comparison website, what would they do next? And 43% say that they would sign up for a plan online directly through my preferred company's website. So British Gas shortlisters are not seeing British Gas at a key juncture during the search journey, and these potential customers are not making it to the British Gas website where they would complete the purchase because a fundamental link is missing in the chain. They do not have a presence in a key juncture of the journey. Okay, so that's the industry piece. Now the final piece, the consumer. I'm going a little bit over, but I'm very, very close to the end. So looking at the consumer piece, then I just wanted to talk about segmentation. This is again from an insurance industry in Ireland. I looked at 2 different types of segments within this overall program, and this is at a rolled up sample size again, so we're looking at a big sample, and I was looking at 2 different types of customers, one who said that they were interested in a product based on price, and another one who said that they were interested in a product based on features. And so what I was able to pull out is I could see that there are differences between these people in terms of what they want and how they want to communicate. So if this was a real life situation, which of the following would you likely use during any stage of researching your insurance options? So phone up an insurance company, more important for feature people. Online using an insurance company website, more important for feature people. Online using a search engine, more important for feature people. They're looking for more information. They want to research more. And what's interesting when we looked at it is that this group are actually younger than those who say that they want to go on the basis of price. So in an insurance market, you may think that they may be more risk averse. The more older that they are, and the more older they are, then basically they want to get their hands on more information in order to be able to make an informed decision. But in this particular case, it wasn't the case. Moving on to, again, back into the financial product market in the UK, looking at the proportion of time consumers spend researching for different types of products. We've got current accounts, 4 hours, is the active time they spend searching, and the duration is over 6 days. Personal loans, 4 hours over 5 days. Credit cards, 3 hours over 5 days. Mortgages, 9.4 hours over 13 days. So the features or the facts that are coming out of the data, no major surprises, but what it is getting us to do is to think about the segmentation of these people and how they approach the marketplace is different. And therefore, we need to understand that if we are looking to build attribution models. We need to understand who is it that we're measuring? What are we anticipating and expecting from them in terms of what they're looking for? On the right, you have the number of brands in the repertoire for each one of these different current account providers when they get to that shortlist stage. So mortgages is higher than for the others. So that brings me to the end. We have done shortlisting. We have looked at the efforts of marketing. We move from shortlisting to preference. After you've shortlisted, what happens next? You win. But why were you the final preference? If you don't know why, maybe you don't change it, because if it's not broken, don't fix it. But ultimately, in order to be able to guarantee repeat success, you need to understand why. If you lose, why have you lost at this opportunity? Your return on investment in terms of marketing hasn't gotten you over the line. Who did you lose customers to? And so we have this initial preference that we talked about earlier on. Those who have a larger initial preference have an advantage because they have less to do in terms of getting onto the final shortlist and then onto the final preference. And the screen in front of us shows us that within the financial market in the UK, across all of the products combined together, the different brands have different types of advantages. And you have to understand what those advantages are when it comes to actually playing your cards within your marketing budget. So, final preference, again, motor and travel, the two different markets here, looking at the differences between them in terms of what's driving final preference. Now, ultimately, we can look at this on the basis of a consumer type. We can look at it on the basis of those who chose a final brand and the reasons why one group who chose one brand may be different to a different group. Like, so for example, those who finally chose Santander in comparison to those who finally chose Nationwide. What is it? Is it a promotional thing? Is it brand relationship? Is it the journey that they took? Is it claimed advertising? And that brings us to this concept of the attribution model. But before I do that, to wrap up where I started off, we talked about mortgages in the Irish market. We talked about AIB. We talked about looking at their shortlist to conversion ratio. But what we want to know is, who were the lost opportunities? So those who shortlisted AIB but didn't choose them, these are the banks that they actually chose. And these are the reasons in terms of final preference. There are multiple reasons in there. These are the top three. They have good interest rate options, 40%. I've used them before. 33%. I trust this company, 33%. And those who chose AIB, 47% of those who currently have a mortgage with AIB chose them at the final preference. So this is our churn rate. And the reasons why they chose AIB, their options were easy to understand. Their website helped me find mortgage options quickly, and I trust this company. Very, very different to the people who decided not to choose AIB in the end. So, do you know the importance and the weight of the previous relationship that a consumer may have with you or another provider? Do you have passive measurement in terms of the online journey and understanding what the multiple pathways are, at what points they're being intercepted, what the touch points are, and ultimately the importance of the different touch points that they're coming across. And then obviously advertising. How are we measuring that? Online versus offline. Are we using recall? What are our choices there in terms of market research metrics? So that is the attribution model that I am proposing. That's the one that we use within this digital marketing effectiveness program. Digital marketing effectiveness program covers lots of elements. Customer mindset, customer behavior. It doesn't cover audit. We look at actionable advice, and we also look at competitor performance, because ultimately the digital marketing effectiveness program is a mirror of the industry in which we are looking, and we give a competitor view across the whole entire industry. We do have another product, as I mentioned, the digital sales effectiveness program, and that is where we bring in the audit element as well. And these two products merged together really are very holistic. And then finally, data and output comparisons of other research products and digital effectiveness, things that we cover: surveying, conversion data, search terms, click path and heat maps. We don't provide the audit scores within the DME, but we do within the DSE, syndicated data and data collection monthly and half yearly for the DSE. So 3 things to leave you with: measure what you can measure, understand the journey, industry and the consumer. These are all key elements, part of the attribution model. Without knowing why, predictions are just a guessing game. Thank you very much for your time. I went a little bit over, but thank you for staying with us. I'm going to take a break now for just a second and see what questions have come in. And I'll be back online in just a second to see if any questions have come in and to answer those. So if you want to bear with me for just a moment, and I'll be back to you in a second. Okay, so we're going to take just one question because I went over so much, and one key question has come in, which I think is very important. So a question has come in is, do we work with clients in terms of the insights that we are generating in terms of the data? We provide a portal where our clients can access on demand all of the results from our own proprietary portal online. And that's where the data is available to you and your team at all times. But of course, yes, we also provide, there's training in terms of the proper portal, but then we also have the client advisor team, which is the team that I'm part of. We work with the clients to interpret the data in terms of your own commercial objectives and even the personal vision within your own department. But we work very closely with our clients to try and unlock the insights that you are that would be relevant to the areas that you're specifically looking at or the pains that you're currently seeing within the market. Ultimately, the digital marketing effectiveness program is a mirror of the competitive industry, that whole entire industry. It can be used to retrospectively look at performance, or it can be used to, measure campaign effectiveness when you're on air versus off air because of the longitudinal nature of the data, or it can also be used for drilling into potential segments that you haven't gone after yet, or realizing those lost opportunities and who you're losing customers to and how you can arrest that. So yes, we work very, very closely with clients, and we do that in multiple different capacities with different types of outputs and reports and workshops and all that type of stuff. The stuff that I've gone through today really is just a snapshot of a very comprehensive program with a huge amount of data in it. So if you would like to know more, please do get in touch. I've put my email address on the screen in front of you, and then obviously our Twitter and our blog, where you'll find some more information, and we have regular pieces coming out all the time. So thank you very much for coming along, and please do get in touch if you have any questions.